Move in. Stop. Enhance 34 to 36. Pull back. Wait a minute. Give me a hard copy right there. Two popular genres in film are science fiction and detective stories. Classic examples like Star Trek and Star Wars are what comes to mind when most people think of science fiction, even though Star Wars is more of a fantasy.
Put it all together and what have you got?
Murder, my dear Watson.
Murder?
And when you think of famous detectives, Sherlock Holmes or Humphrey Bogart probably come to mind. Maybe even Batman, who's known for his detective skills. All these examples are great for the kind of story they're telling, but you don't hear of many science fiction detectives. Well, except for Rick Deckard from Blade Runner. Blade Runner is what you call high-concept science fiction. It's poetry, bold and experimental. It's a risk telling any story with an unconventional approach, but like most of Ridley Scott's films, it's worth the investment. And in this case, Blade Runner requires a second look. Now, in 2017, most of us are taking that second look as we try to solve a mystery of the film itself in anticipation for the long-awaited sequel to the original with Blade Runner 2049. Well, Ridley Scott has left us some clues to uncover a revelation from the first film that will enhance our experience when we see the sequel. But before I give my thoughts on the new film, let's look at some of the history first. Blade Runner came out in the summer of 1982, a time when Harrison Ford was known for playing Han Solo and Indiana Jones. His roles in both those films would only set a comparison that Blade Runner was never aiming to meet. It's just not the same style of storytelling. Star Wars and Raiders were mainstream, whereas Blade Runner had the makings of a cult classic. At first, Ridley Scott didn't even want to direct Blade Runner. At the time, he wasn't a big fan of science fiction and just finished making Alien. But after Alien's success and his appreciation for what George Lucas did with Star Wars, he decided to take another look at the Blade Runner script, which at that time was called Dangerous Days. Speaking of Star Wars, the set builders on Blade Runner recycled model pieces from some of the spaceships used in Star Wars. If you look closely here, you can see where they used the Millennium Falcon as a skyscraper, just here on the left. And the roof of the police station was a piece taken from the spaceship from Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It later would also pop up as an homage from future filmmakers. You can see it plainly here in Akira. Blade Runner's influence reached more than just Akira. It spawned a whole list of cyberpunk films that exist in this genre. Titles like Ghost in the Shell, which in turn inspired The Matrix.
A new life awaits you in the off-world colony.
The futuristic city of Los Angeles is one of Blade Runner's biggest achievements. It's really the first film since Metropolis to fully realize a city of the future in such a grand scale. Ridley Scott's film is a dirty, cold presentation, but man is it beautiful. The film gets its futuristic look from Sid Mead. He's the artist responsible for all the cityscapes and the vehicles. I happen to know Mead's nephew Marshall, who recently became a friend of mine, and I can only imagine the stories he's heard from his uncle. Another cool fact about Blade Runner's production is the prop design. The credit for that goes to Stephen Dane, the man also responsible for designing the props in Ghostbusters, from the proton packs to the Ecto-1. One thing that makes Blade Runner extra special is that it's one of the last science fiction films to be completely shot in camera. Nothing that you see on screen is artificial. No computer graphics, no green screen. Just models, tiny lights. It's all analog. Today, however, Blade Runner is now all digital. Unless you have a personal projector at home to watch it on film, you most likely own it on DVD or Blu-ray. And now with the 4K transfer that was just released, we can now see the film even better than when it first premiered in 1982. It's been cleaned up and sharpened, and if you're watching the film for the first time, you'll see just how beautiful it really is. But after watching it, you might have some questions.
Memories. You're talking about memories.
The film explores two main themes, memory and identity. The movie is based on a book from 1968 called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? So what does the title Blade Runner mean? Well, the term doesn't refer to anything specific in the story. The writers of the film simply borrowed the name from a book and used it as a title. So basically, a Blade Runner is a cop who hunts down androids. In the film, Earth is slowly falling apart. Pollution and overpopulation are everywhere, and there's been several world wars and a biological plague. The plot revolves around Rick Deckard, a retired android hunter that gets blackmailed by his former police captain into returning to work to complete one more job.
Hiya, Deck.
Brian?
The case he's assigned to requires him to track down and destroy 4 illegal replicants. Replicants are an elite model of android, and these 4 have just landed on the planet illegally. To get familiar with the case, Deckard is sent to the Tyrell Corporation, where the replicants were manufactured, to meet Rachel, a replicant who isn't aware that she's actually a replicant.
Do you mind if I smoke?
It won't affect the test.
And he conducts a test on her, like most of the replicants he hunts, to determine that they are indeed a replicant.
It's your birthday. Someone gives you a calfskin wallet.
I wouldn't accept it. Also, I'd report the person who gave it to me to the police.
Most replicants are given only 4 years to live. This was a failsafe that Tyrell included in their design, because over time, replicants tended to start developing human emotions, which included the aggressive ones like anger and jealousy. Because of this, Tyrell programs each one with a termination date. Rachel, however, is special. She wasn't given a termination date.
Rachel is an experiment, nothing more.
Deckard eventually breaks the news to Rachel that she isn't human, and he does it by revealing that her memories are just implants. They never really happened. Blade Runners like Deckard are familiar with these fake memories that replicants usually receive. He comforts Rachel after he tells her the truth, and they eventually run away together at the end of the film. On the other side, the replicants are led by Roy Batty, who, like the others, is at the end of his 4-year lifespan and is about to die. That's the main reason why the group of replicants came down to Earth. Roy had a personal quest to meet his maker in the hopes that he could extend his life. He wants to live and experience all the emotions that humans can have. He's a troubled character, but unlike most bad guys, you can understand him. And that's what makes his final words on the rooftop at the end of the film so powerful.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. All those moments will be lost in time. Like tears in rain.
At the time of this recording, there exists now 7 cuts of the film. So, if you're new to Blade Runner, you might be wondering which one you should watch. Remember the revelation that I mentioned earlier? Well, that comes into play when considering which cut of the film to watch. In my opinion, it really just comes down to two options: the 1982 theatrical release and the final cut from 2007. The theatrical release includes something that has divided fans since it premiered in 1982. After the studio executives at Warner Brothers saw an early cut of the film, they demanded that a voiceover be placed throughout the film in order to better explain to the audience what was going on. You either love the voiceover or you hate it.
They don't advertise for killers in a newspaper. That was my profession. Ex-cop. Ex-Blade Runner.
This was the version I watched when I saw the film for the first time in college. It worked for me, because Blade Runner is supposed to be like a classic film noir. I enjoyed almost every time it was put into the film, except that final scene.
I don't know why he saved my life. Maybe in those last moments he loved life more than he ever had before.
It's such a mood killer.
Just his life.
Harrison Ford hated it too. The final cut is what I personally would recommend watching. It's been given the best color correction and has been cleaned up. The real reason to watch this version is because it reveals something that no other cut gives you. The answer to the question fans have been debating for over 35 years. Is Deckard really a replicant? If you've only seen the theatrical or the director's cut, that question probably never crossed your mind. It's merely hinted at, and you probably looked right through it. What am I talking about? Well, there were two lines in the film that suggested that Deckard was a replicant. One of them was from Rachel after he tested her,
Did you ever take that test yourself?
and one was from Gaff at the end of the film.
You've done a man's job, sir.
A man's job? Why did he say it like that? But these two examples aren't the clues that have spawned such a heated debate. This is where the final cut comes in. It provides you with the last pieces you need to complete the puzzle. The first is a shot that was put back in the film that was originally cut. The shot is of Deckard's eyes that glow in the same way a replicant's eyes do when the light hits them just right. The second is a dream sequence that Deckard has involving a unicorn. To those that connect the dots, it almost completely confirms that Deckard isn't human. And we know this because Gaff has been leaving tiny origami animals at different locations throughout the film. The final one he leaves is at Deckard's apartment at the end of the film. He leaves him a unicorn as a way to let him know the truth. As mentioned before, Blade Runner cops are familiar with the implanted memories that replicants have. Those memories help them identify specific replicants, and in this case, there's no way Gaff would have known about Deckard's vision if it wasn't an implant that he had knowledge of. If it's true, then it's pretty poetic, as well as ironic when you watch the film again and hear Deckard say this line about Rachel.
She doesn't know.
She's beginning to suspect, I think.
Suspect? How can it not know what it is?
All of this evidence, though, is trumped by one final clue that isn't found in any of the films, but buried in the middle of the 3-hour making of video called Dangerous Days as a deleted clip.
You've done a man's job, sir. But are you sure you are a man?
In just 8 words, this clip basically confirms that Deckard is a replicant. And now my thoughts on the new film. Blade Runner 2049 is a sequel 35 years in the making, and it was worth the wait. Earlier this year, I was blown away by the look of Ghost in the Shell, a movie that was pretty much a love letter to the original Blade Runner. All of those cityscapes were directly inspired by the look of the film, especially the Asian influence. Sadly, that movie was pretty forgettable. But I remember sitting in the theater thinking it was going to be hard to beat the amazing visuals that Ghost in the Shell had. Now I can confidently say Blade Runner 2049 has a look that beats all the competition. It's a beautiful piece of artwork, and it represents a type of film that is truly special, and also dying. Not many people went to see it. The film drastically underperformed last weekend at the box office, and to me, that's really sad. It means that future projects like these probably won't get made. Hollywood is evolving, and mostly just financing blockbusters, which aren't a bad thing, but it's important to tell different kinds of stories. That's what challenges our minds to be creative. The film is a modern masterpiece, and I wish everyone could see it. It's difficult to discuss the film because the plot is one big spoiler. Overall, I give the film an A+. I was planning on doing a section here at the end that would unpack all of the fun plot elements, but instead, I want to ask you to go see the film, to buy a ticket and support it. It also answers some fun questions that fans have had for years, like why is Rachel considered so special? And it also poses some new ones as well. To fully appreciate it, I won't give those things away here. You should see it unfold for yourself. It's compelling in so many ways. I hope you liked the review. Leave your comments down below. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.